Did you use any performance-enhancing drugs?
Sammy Sosa, number 66.
Did you use performance-enhancing drugs?
Paul George is opting out of his contract.
Oklahoma City has a real chance.
The Lakers are like, oh, God, we thought we had this one in the bag.
It's incumbent on the Lakers to get a deal done for Kawhi Leonard.
It's just a blessing to be able to give the knowledge that I have with the game.
2 years and I haven't been able to talk to him.
They have a 99% conviction rate. We will learn his verdict.
Everybody's watching us on the different cable networks. They find this more exciting than the NFL and a hell of a lot more dangerous.
What you see may change your perception of any sporting event. Get this, shoot this.
Welcome to Outside the Lines. I'm Bob Lee. And so now it's 35 hours and counting. And so many things in life never get done unless there's a deadline. So why should the Lakers be any different approaching player option 0 hour? It's going to be an incredible weekend. It's already begun. That's our big story from Studio C. So the Lakers have a pitch script for Paul George, who today, Woj is reporting, is going to decline his player option in OKC. There's an actual script for a video production aimed at, quote, that kid from Palmdale, which the Lakers would like to show George in their free agent presentation. Now, the employees of Magic's club have all been warned about the pitfalls of tampering, giving last year's $500,000 fine over Rob Pelinka's contact with Paul George's agent. But all the chessboard free agent maneuvering in SoCal right now pivots on what is reported to be renewed trade talks between the Lakers and the Spurs for Kawhi Leonard, as well as the Spurs now talking with the Celtics. Ramona Shelburne, Adrian Wojnarowski, and this man joining me now, Brian Windhorst, early this morning, breaking the story of these renewed L.A. negotiations. They all got bucket data plans. Okay, Lakers, Spurs, Kawhi. Where does that stand? The embers have come back to life.
Yeah, so, the Lakers obviously have a difficult situation here, Bob, because they know that Kawhi Leonard has an interest in coming to them in free agency next year. So why would they trade all of their prime assets, all of their young players, maybe some draft picks for him when he could come next year? Well, the answer is, what if they don't get him next year and LeBron James doesn't come this year? And so that has applied some pressure to try to get something done here. Here's the thing, though, Bob. In talking to people around the league, I don't think that the Spurs feel the same pressure that the Lakers do. It may be the Lakers' deadline to try to pitch to LeBron, but the Spurs still have Kawhi Leonard under contract for a whole nother year. And knowing what I know about them, I expect them to be patient. And don't forget, they can still offer him $250 million if they want. And so with that trump card in their pocket, I don't expect them to press the fast forward button in this what could be a long process.
Yeah, that's billion with a B. They were exceptionally patient this year. So what are the Celts here? Are they just kind of like kicking the tires? And they really don't have to do anything if they don't want to here.
Yeah, so we're talking about the Celtics, who are experts in negotiation. And I think if you're San Antonio, you would much rather make a deal with Boston than L.A. Boston has better assets. So wouldn't it benefit you if you were San Antonio, if Boston all of a sudden got nervous you were going to make a deal with L.A.? That's this giant game of inverse and reverse and direct on leverage that's being played amongst all these organizations. Don't forget about Philadelphia, who's also involved in this as well, that could make an offer for Kawhi Leonard. And ultimately, what's important to realize is that the Spurs still believe that they can patch things up with Kawhi Leonard. It's going to take a really remarkable offer to them to part with that concept. And remember, if you're the Celtics, if you're the 76ers, why get into a bidding war with LA when you know if you wait a week, you may be able to have more leverage? This is very complicated, and it's a very big game of chicken, Bob. And we have some guys who are running these franchises who are not afraid to gamble. Danny Ainge, R.C. Buford, the Sixers have done very well with their deals. So I would say settle in for more intrigue going forward.
No one blinking just yet. It's not quite the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, Stephen A. Smith, about 90 minutes ago, letting us know via First Take that he had been hearing that LeBron had reached out to Kevin Durant, who had said, I'm going back. Don't worry about me. I'm going back to the Warriors, possibly joining forces in Los Angeles. What can you illuminate us, debunk, confirm?
Yeah, I believe that to be true. LeBron and Kevin have had a relationship going back more than 10 years. LeBron is a free agent to be. Durant is a free agent to be. I expected them to discuss this. I also believe that Kevin Durant will be staying in Golden State. And really, Bob, the overarching story here, LeBron is communicating with other players about playing in Los Angeles. So the bottom line, will LeBron James go and become a member of the Lakers if he can't get anybody to come with him? Does he trust the Lakers and Magic Johnson to build a team around him if he's first through the door? Because that's a possibility. To me, out of everything that I've talked to people in the league, that is the bottom line. Does LeBron trust the Lakers if he comes alone? That will be the future of the NBA, and I think that'll be decided in the next few days.
Meanwhile, the game of lightning chess among all the GMs continues to see if they blink. Brian Windhorst, thanks. Now, the NFL. Popularity, trends, and politics. As this summer's sports news is dominated not by baseball season, but by the machinations of NBA free agency and that frenzy, even weeks away from the opening of NFL training camps, the continuing question is the popularity of the NFL. Yes, we know it is America's game, but with TV ratings down 10% last year, attendance down 3%, and the politicization of the game through on-field protests and social activism, a regular part of the political conversation. What are the trends? Well, the University of Texas Tribune poll of registered voters in the Lone Star State. Now, this is prime football country. Some rather sobering findings. 47% of those polled have an unfavorable opinion of the NFL. 26%, and that's less than the number of undecided, 26% have a favorable opinion. And last night, at a political rally in North Dakota, President Trump contrasted the drama of the political arena with what he said is the diminished appeal of the NFL. It's one of his favorite political targets.
You know, when the NFL's down 20%, it's the flag, but it's also the fact that everybody's watching us on the different cable networks. Because frankly, they find this more exciting than the NFL and a hell of a lot more dangerous, right?
They don't wear helmets, though, in politics that we can see. Football polling poorly in Texas. That's a bit of a headline. A reason to check in with ESPN NFL analyst Damien Woody. We're not here to talk politics, per se, but let's talk about those numbers. It's Texas.
Right.
High school football owns the state. It's a religion, and nearly 2-to-1 unfavorable opinions.
Yeah, listen, when it comes to the NFL, it's all about messaging, right? You know, the NFL always wants to put out the positive PR. But I've always said, and this has been a problem with the National Football League, they've been a reactive league, whether we talk about, domestic violence, and in this particular case, the whole anthem protest. So when you look at what has happened is we had all this drama about the national anthem, the anthem protest. But what you saw this past season, as the season went on, those protesters were diminishing to the point where you could almost count the people protesting the anthem on two hands.
Yeah, by week 17, it was essentially a non-issue.
It was a non-issue, Bob. And I felt like, and a lot of people felt like that the NFL reacted to a lot of things that the president had mentioned throughout the offseason, and then they implemented the policy. If they had kept doing what they were doing behind the scenes, working with the Players Coalition, this whole thing probably would have disappeared going into the next football season. So now we're sitting in a situation where people are going to be looking, see who's in the locker room, where they're going to protest. And I think that in and of itself has caused a lot of people to have an unfavorable position on the National Football League.
It's interesting. This was a poll of registered voters, and those numbers we just put up were overall. If you go into the various levels of the poll, you look at the racial divide. Black respondents, black registered voters in Texas had a much more positive. They were nearly a mirror image flip. They were positive about the National Football League, interestingly, as they confront the issue, if you're a black American, of Colin Kaepernick, whether there's any collusion, and all those issues. I find that very curious.
It is, and I think what you see from the numbers is a lot of people of color are behind what these players are doing, because a lot of these guys, not a lot of information that's being talked about. What are they doing outside of the game? Obviously, these respondents love the game of football. But I think what you're seeing, a lot of people of color, what they're responding to is the social activism aspect of it and just being behind what these guys are doing, not only on the football field, but outside of the game to help what they consider a much bigger cause.
Whether you agree with Donald Trump or not, and there's a great divide on that, we acknowledge in this country, I don't think anyone can deny it has been a very skillful political tool that he has used. He's used it well. And here we are in an election year. We may just be at first base and seeing this continuing as an issue through the year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is definitely a polarizing issue. And clearly, like we've seen from the president, he's using this, in like you said, an election year. So this type of thing will not go away, especially now we're going into the season. Again, there's all eyes are going to be on this national protest to see who's staying in the locker room, who's maybe doing scorekeeping. That's going to be the deal. And again, this thing probably would have died down if the NFL had just kind of stayed status quo throughout this offseason.
And surprising poll numbers in Texas. Damien, good to see you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Now, the case of Wendell Brown, the former Ball State and CFL football player, arrested and jailed in China 20 months ago following a bar fight. Brown was living in China. He was coaching football there when a scuffle in a Chongqing bistro landed him in jail. He has consistently maintained he was merely defending himself. Brown was convicted last year, and despite hopes that when he was finally sentenced last night, U.S. time, he might be deported, well, instead, Wendell Brown was sentenced to 4 years in a Chinese prison. And joining me now from Detroit, his mother, Antoinette Brown. Antoinette, thank you for joining us. Your reaction to the news which you learned last night?
Thank you for having me. First, I was just totally heartbroken. It was devastating to hear that they actually gave him a sentence to time.
Yeah, 4 years. Will he receive any credit for time served?
From my understanding, with talking with the consulate, yes, he would receive credit for the time already served. So they're looking at almost 2 years, but we want him home because it's clearly unfair justice.
Who have you heard from in that regard? I know you went to Washington recently. You had a series of meetings scheduled, and then they were canceled. Have you heard from anyone in the State Department in the last day or so?
Not in the last day or so, but I have been talking closely with the State Department headquarters and a lot of people in Washington.
Yeah. When's the last time you've actually spoken to your son?
2016, 2 days prior to this incident happening.
How have you communicated with him in the meantime?
In the meantime, once a month, we communicate through a letter, through the embassy. I send letters to him. He sends letters to me.
Are you considering traveling to China?
No, absolutely not. And with what my son is going through, I wouldn't feel comfortable.
Yeah. So what's your plan now? Are you going to pursue legal appeal in China and a diplomatic path here in the United States? What are you trying to do now?
Yes, that's the plan. For Wendell insists that he get an appeal, and his lawyer Sophia Wright and lawyer Tong are both working to do the paperwork to have an appeal.
You know, I've read some of the things he's written. It's been shared with us, his letters. He has an abiding faith, and who knows him better than his mom? Is that what's keeping him keep on right now?
Absolutely. He's a very spiritual man, and he has faith and knows that God is going to see him through this.
Yeah, and so the legal hopes in China, the diplomatic perhaps solution through Washington. Antoinette Brown, a lot of folks are thinking of you and your family and your son. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Next, direct questions and pointed follow-ups to Sammy Sosa. The question, performance-enhancing drugs? Question mark.
AARP can help you become your healthiest self. It's why we offer health tips for your body and your brain. So take on today and every day with AARP. Learn how at takeontoday.aarp.
Today in the B Block, Sammy Sosa, 20 years after the epic home run chase that summer with Mark McGwire. Sunday, back on Sunday this past week on E60. If you were with us, you saw that we promised you a conversation this week with a retired Cubs slugger.
'98, I don't know how to describe that year. It was incredible. I mean, wow. 66 home run, and now I'm sitting here now like, wow, that was that good?
Sammy Sosa was godlike with a bat in his hand.
You gotta be kidding me.
This is the classic mythological story. And then it all fell apart.
We went from a 1998 magical season to years of questioning.
20 years now after the home run chase. Did you use any performance-enhancing drugs at any time in your career?
Sammy Sosa in conversation with my friend and colleague Jeremy Schaap. He will answer that question in just a bit, Sammy, but first, people see Sammy Sosa. We've had glimpses, but he's been out of the public eye. What's the deal?
Yeah, well, it's obviously hard to ignore when you sit down with Sammy Sosa and you haven't really seen him up close and personal, as I haven't in almost 2 decades. His skin is noticeably lighter. This is something that's been talked about now for almost a full decade on the internet. Whenever pictures of him surface, it sets the internet on fire. And we talked about it. We talked about it at length. And ultimately, while Sammy kind of talks around the subject, he says that he uses a lotion that has lightened his skin. It's an enormous industry, by the way, the skin bleaching industry. And he says that he likes the way that he looks, and it's nobody's business, why he's doing it. The deeper issues about identity and race are things that he doesn't really choose to get into, but he concedes that, he has been lightening his skin. I asked his wife, Sonia, about it as well, and she said, I like the way it looks.
You two guys spent a lot of time together back in that marvelous baseball summer of 1998. Witness the fact that 2 decades on, you can talk about things as personal as this and the PED question that we're coming to. But let's go back and give you a sense. Who's that young fellow there?
That's a good
we
question.
all look different going back 20
don't need
years.
Sammy.
Yeah, but here's a slice of the conversation from back then.
You think about where you'd be without baseball?
Well, without baseball, I don't know what I would be today. Baseball has been very, very good to me.
If you didn't watch Saturday Night Live back then, of course, the Chico Escuela character. So, very versed in American culture.
Oh, no doubt about it. One of the interesting things about that, the baseball has been very, very good to me, quote, which he used constantly in the summer of 1998. I think it was me. I'm almost certain that it was me who introduced that quotation to him the year before at the suggestion of our old boss, John Walsh, who heard I was sitting down with Sammy and said, you've got to ask him about Garrett Morris and Chico Escuela. And he retained that, and then he used it, and it became kind of a byword for what Sammy was doing. And the ebullience he brought to that pursuit of the home run record in 1998, which stood in such marked contrast to Mark McGwire's attitude.
I remember the 61 count. All right. Now we get to the meat of your conversation, certainly. It's the question that follows Sosa, especially after he used the attorney, of course, at the infamous hearing in Congress back in 2005. The question, performance-enhancing drugs.
20 years now after the home run chase. Did you use any performance-enhancing drugs at any time in your career?
I never had a test positive in this country.
That's not the same thing, Sam.
No, it is.
No.
It is. It is.
No, I'm just asking you.
I never test positive, so.
Well, according to the New York Times, you did test positive.
A lot of people did.
Are you saying that
No.
the Times is wrong?
No, not that Times is wrong. But a lot of people got out in that, in that paper. But
That's true. 104 names.
Exactly.
In 2009, the New York Times reported that 104 players, including you, had tested positive in 2003 when it was supposed to be anonymous. You've already said you didn't test positive. Did you use performance-enhancing drugs?
No, my friend.
Never.
I never miss any test, in the major league level.
There's a difference between not testing positive and not doing it. And you're saying you didn't do it?
Once again, I never text any, positive. So.
clearly not a comfortable moment or topic for him at all.
No, not at all. And, it's, for a lot of reasons, it's an unsatisfactory answer to say, I didn't test positive. Obviously, that's not addressing the question in its entirety. But also, you have to remember that when he was hitting all those home runs in 1998, and by the way, Sammy Sosa hit more home runs than anyone else in the history of baseball over a 5-year span. That span from 98 through 2002. 292 home runs. Baseball wasn't testing until 2003. And then it was supposed to be anonymous, which is what we're talking about with the Times report. And it didn't become until 2004. The testing was associated with a name, or was supposed to be. He did walk off a few minutes later from our interview.
He got out of the chair.
He got out of the chair.
Not in reaction to any specific question, I understand, but the tone of what had
I think it was, he was still, although it was a few minutes later, he was still clearly upset about having to talk about steroids. But eventually, Sammy did come back and sit down and expand on some of the other things we've been talking about. And there were a lot of other topics which I think are interesting, including, his departure from the Cubs and his relationship with them now and his feelings about the Hall of Fame and the issue about his appearance, which we do address.
He's estranged from the Cubs, and the Cubs are estranged from him under new ownership.
That's right. And this is a situation that's been going on for a number of years. He says he hasn't been at Wrigley Field since his last game there in 2004, which is remarkable for someone who is arguably the most popular athlete, not only in Chicago, but in the United States of America, you could say, at the turn of the 21st century. There have been some attempts at a rapprochement between the Cubs and
just a
Sosa.
simple sentence would do it, but he's not been willing. They were
correct.
Close at one point. All of this we will cover. Jeremy Schaap, exceptional work Sunday morning, E16, 9 a.m. Eastern time. I look forward to it. Next up, we have late word of a major fine, multi-million-dollar fine in the NFL.
I'm a one-trick pony. Literally. I show up at kids' parties and act cute. That's pretty much it. So excuse me for being bitter. When Geico says not only could we save you money on car insurance, but we do more. Like give you 24/7 access online, over the phone, or even via our award-winning mobile app. Well, ooh la la. Aren't they multi-talented? Hey, I said organic carrots.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
College World Series determined tonight, Game 3, Arkansas, Oregon State, ESPN 2 at 7 Eastern, and on the app. Sports Center with Michael and David at 6 Eastern. KO comes by. Why LeBron should stay in Cleveland and why the England-Belgium loser is really a winner. Sports Center at 6 Eastern, and again on the app. And there is breaking news just in. The National Football League's investigation into allegations of improper workplace conduct by the owner of the Panthers, Jerry Richardson, has substantiated those allegations. The NFL has fined Richardson $2.75 million. That money is going to be earmarked to support organizations addressing race and gender-based issues and also to fund league-wide workplace training. Last month, owners in the league approving the sale of the Panthers to David Tepper. Finalization of that sale expected in the next 2 weeks. Nearly a $3 million fine coming down. NFL Live is next. They'll have more. Jack Collinsworth is by. Friday 4 tomorrow, right here.
Next. You're holding up the line, ma'am.
What did you say?
You're next in line for the water slide, ma'am. Feet forward and enjoy the ride.
Okay, dearie. This does look fun. You melted me. I've melted.
The Wicked Witch of the West on a water slide? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
See what you've done. Oh!
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.